so I always have my coffee. Joe does not. I think it's false advertising, but what can I say?
If I have
Okay.
coffee at 2:19 in the afternoon, it's going to be bad for everybody who's on this. And now we're live, and that's right. There are only, I think it's because Steve's not that popular, there are only 85 people waiting to watch us. Anyway,
I'll try and pick it up in the next couple minutes if I can. All right.
I think you will. I mean, we're looking at you as the draw. Okay, you know, like you're the draw.
That was a mistake.
It's like when you're an opener for a country music star or a rock star, like you're that guy. You know?
Okay. You say so.
So anyway, there's some kind of weirdo lag going on with me. Anyway, so Joe Harford, Angie Singer Keating, our friend Steve Agnoli, who is a global CIO. That's like a really big deal. But first of all, thank you. It has been an incredibly long time since we've seen you. And I'm going to put you on the spot, although I think you're going to remember. Do you remember how you met us?
I remember we used your services back in the day to on some things, but is there something more to the story than that?
Bingo. No. Actually, it was funny because I was out in Pittsburgh and I was introduced by another IT partner to, I do not remember the woman's name, but she was your rep with IBM because she was selling hardware. And at the time, the firm you were working with basically said, listen, we've got this IT hardware, not just here in Pittsburgh, but literally all over the United States that we got to deal with. You were smart enough to focus in on the data piece, like what the heck are we going to do with this? And how are we going to make sure it's done right? I didn't know because I'm just a sales guy. So I talked to Angie and, you know, Angie was really super smart and she figured it out. But it was funny because IBM at the time basically said, you need to find this partner. You need to work with Reclamere. So that was kudos for us. That was pretty cool. But I remember coming out and meeting you, and I'm not blowing smoke when I say that you were probably one of the most down-to-earth people that I got to meet in my career who carries that label of CIO. You know, that's like super smart and like really powerful and all that kind of jazz.
Good looking, you know, that kind of thing.
Very, very good.
Yeah.
In fact, you had wine and cheese. You've gotten better with age, you know. So I think that's pretty cool.
I appreciate it.
But you know, I think what's most important about it, Steve, is we're talking about well over a decade ago. We did this work. In fact, you know what? I know it's longer than that because Angie and I actually bought out both of our business partners in 2014. So this was way before that.
Yeah, it was.
The reason I think it's important is because back in the day, you were focused on information security. Like it was a big deal, as well as compliance for how, like, where's this equipment going to go? You're going to throw it in the Ohio River, or like, what are you going to do? Right.
Sure. Right.
So today is just about having a conversation on, oh my gosh, you wrapped up your career, pretty successful. Anybody who checks you out on LinkedIn. Now you are, I get the idea, semi-retired. So you can talk about what it means to be semi-retired.
Okay.
Angie's not prepared with any really great questions. So she's probably like on ChatGPT trying to figure out what kind of questions should I ask Global CIO, because she's kind of a goofball. But in all seriousness, so what is it like to semi-retire from the CIO world for you?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for allowing me to be with you guys. This is a nice treat, and I'm very appreciative to be on the phone, so to speak, with you both. It's been a long time, but I'm glad we're able to catch up again. Yeah, you know, Joe, I don't know what this means, to be honest. It hasn't been that long. It's only been a month or so I'm not really quite sure. You know, I wander around the house and, you know, don't know what room I'm in and, you know, things like that. So, you know, I haven't quite figured out what this is all going to look like. I do think that, I was very, very fortunate to have the roles that I've had over the years and work with the people that I worked with. So I'm still trying to figure that out, but I do have some consulting stuff that I'm doing, and I
Okay.
do some teaching, actually in the CIO executive program at
Nice.
Carnegie Mellon, and they have a great program there. The idea or the goal of that program is to help folks who are either new to the CIO role or want to be, soon in the CIO role, and we kind of help them with how to be successful in that regard, and what are some of the things that you want to look for and some of the techniques that you want to use and how do you communicate, and as well as some of the technical stuff that goes
Sure.
along with it, so including the data security pieces. And so that's been very, very, very good, and I've been doing that for several years, so we're still figuring it out, but
Okay.
it's a good problem to have.
It is. And I'm sure that, I'm not going to ask you to do it, but if you were to stand up, I'm sure you have pants on. Unlike a lot of retired people that get on this and they have just a shirt on, they look great, but they don't have any pants on, and that's okay.
Yeah, I'm not a fan
Typically
of
gym shorts. I'm just simply saying it would be gym shorts. That's all. We're going to keep it PG-13.
Sounds good.
So I'm curious how much, and if you want to talk either in degrees of change or content
Mhm.
in the role of a CIO, how much did it change in your career, let's just say in the last 10 years?
I mean, I think it changed a lot. It changed a lot in many areas, and in other areas, it hasn't changed that much. And I'll try and explain why. So certainly, when I first started in the CIO role, the internet was fairly new. Remote computing was not real prevalent, or if it was, it didn't work very well. The impact to systems, or the impact that resulted from systems not being available, whatever, was much less than it is today. We did not run our lives not just in the office, but outside the office, um, like we do today. It was
Mhm.
so from that perspective, the pervasiveness of IT and all the stuff that goes along with it. First the internet, then the cloud, now AI. That stuff wasn't there, so it was very much focused on what can we do to keep things running, to stay out of trouble, as we talked about, but it was more of that kind of thing. Whereas now, which is a good thing, it's become very much a business imperative to have IT capability, and have good IT capability. It's not just keeping the trains running. That's part of it. It's always an important part of it, maybe the biggest part of it in some ways. But the ability for IT functions to provide value to the organization that they're in, as well as their customers or clients, is critical these days. It's how you differentiate in the marketplace, both positively and negatively. It's a situation where you see the ability to retain clients and gain clients based on your IT capability. Not only your IT capability, but it's a big part of it. You can lose clients because of your IT capability. And I don't know that that was the case back in the day. So not only is it, there's more stuff. The world's pretty crazy from a security perspective and things like that. Way more than it used to be. Um, but that value component to IT, I think, is critical, and it's been a good thing. The thing that I think has stayed the same, though, is that IT has always been and always needs to be seen as a component part of the business, not some back office thing that hopefully we never have to deal with, kind of thing. It's been the opportunity to be a business component, just like other key functions within your company. And if we look at IT from that perspective, we look at it strategically, we look at it in a way that actually adds value to the company as well as their customers and clients. That's something that should have been in place from day one, and is still the same today. So how we do that might be different, but the need for us to be a business, viewed as a business function, is critical and should have been the same all the way along.
So I think I would imagine that whole idea of the CIO's role being able to bring the the unit to the table as part of the business function, able to add value to a certain extent, being a service delivery mechanism, as well as a market differentiator, is something that you've got to make sure that you're instilling in these CIOs that you're working with at Carnegie Mellon, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So then I agree with you that it should have been like that back in the day. So now let's take a look at, because I think Angie would agree. If not, I don't care, because I'm the one who started this program. I think that some people would say the same thing about information security, because I don't know that that has matured enough. So let's say that I work for you. You're a CIO wherever, and I happen to work for you either as an information security manager or CISO, somewhere in that space. What advice would you give me that you learned along the way that helped your role as a CIO bring that part to the table, so that now I can bring information security to the table as relevant to the business, important for service delivery, market differentiation, et cetera?
Yeah. I guess I would say, Joe, that kind of what I said before, and that is that the key job from a security perspective, just like from an IT perspective, is to ensure that the organization believes that whatever the information security folks are doing is relevant from a business perspective, and it's relevant to ensure that the business stays competitive, that the business stays viable, and that it's needed. And so, from that perspective, looking at things from a risk, with a risk focus, a business risk focus, not a technology risk focus, a business risk focus, it kind of puts things on par with other key issues that the board of directors, et cetera, is dealing with. And so I think that it's really important to be able to say this is something that we act as and are business people, information security people, IT people. We are business people. We happen to focus in a particular area. But our overall call is to ensure that the business need, the business requirements, the business strategy are met. And we're doing it in a way that, is appropriate for what we're responsible for. So it's, again, I think it's not an information security discussion. It's a risk discussion. It's not a technology discussion. It's a business issues or a business topics discussion. And then we happen to go from there. We have to be able to put these kind of topics in business terms, because that's what management understands, and that's what management makes decisions on. So, again, that looking at this as a business discipline, just like accounting or finance or, how you deal with your customers, it's the same thing. It's just a different topic. That's, I think, where companies differentiate themselves. Obviously, you have to block and tackle well, be it in the security space or any other space. But where you differentiate both internally and externally is by your ability to apply that directly to a business situation and make that situation better. I hope that answered your question.
No, it did. It did. I don't want to suck all the oxygen out of the room, and I want to give my sister an opportunity to ask a question, or I can keep going. It's up to you, Angie.
Well, it's really interesting to get to talk to you from the perspective of an educator at Carnegie Mellon, because I would imagine that the curriculum that you're teaching is most definitely cutting edge, leading, thought leadership.
Yeah.
One of the things I believe is that as IT security practitioners, we're never going to have the influence, respect, and authority that we need at the executive level until the profession rises to the level of a fiduciary with some type of, whether it's state or federally recognized licensing, similar to CPA, similar to the bar, similar to board certification of medical practitioners. And I think it's important because at the end of the day, data is the currency of the 21st century. And so, if CPAs have to have that type of of professional status,
Uh-huh.
doctors, lawyers, and we're the ones that secure the currency
Mhm.
of this new century, then it seems to me that that's going to be necessary. But I don't see whether it's the political will, the professional will, I still see so much pushback in the professional world of IT of we don't need no stinking kind of licensure or anything like that.
So I'm
So
going to interrupt. Is there a question here, or are you just going to continue to ramble incessantly?
I wanted to give Steve the context of the question, which is, do you?
I'm telling you, Steve, this is what happens. This is exactly
This
what
is
happens every time we do this.
every data security over coffee. Yes.
Uh,
So do you ever envision a time where there will be that change, and what do you think it will take for that to happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, Angie. Regardless of what Joe says, that's a terrific question. It's an interesting point, and I have to be honest with you. I don't know that I ever thought of that from a certification standpoint. But I
Well,
guess
let me give you a little bit of where my head is, Steve, because in a prior life, before we started this company, I
yeah.
worked in land surveying and civil engineering. And same thing, professional licensure. If I was working on a land survey and a property owner who was my client told me to put the property corner in a certain place, and that did not align with property law, riparian rights,
Mhm.
whatever it was, I
Okay.
could not do that just because they were paying me. I couldn't also turn a blind eye if I saw someone doing something they shouldn't be doing, such as, moving a riverbed or a stream bed on their private property. I mean,
Sure.
I had responsibilities that went into my licensing, my professional licensing. And it's the same way with CPAs. And it's the same way, you were obligated, you were bound to do the right thing. We don't have that in IT. So that's where I come from, having had that experience in a different profession.
Yeah. I guess what I would say is I look at it from the standpoint of while there may not be individuals who have that certification, so to speak, there are organizations that have that certification, and then organizations apply to that or, receive that, the ISO, et cetera. And so I guess that's where we sit these days. Would something like that be helpful? Yeah, I think it would be. Just like other certifications, like you said, CPA, et cetera, or even
Mhm.
like the more generic things, the MBAs,
Yeah,
et cetera. With all that said, though, I think that at the end of the day, what management and organizations are looking for is competence in the skill set or the job that needs to be done.
sure.
And if you have that, those three letters after your name, and you do a terrible job, nobody's going to care about the three letters.
Right.
So really, is that a mode forward? Absolutely. Is that a great idea? I think it is.
Hmm.
And how that differs though from like a certified risk manager and things like that, I guess would be figured out, a certification in that regard. But I would think that's a pretty long process, right? To get the CPA process in place for information security type situations. But at the end of the day, I think that's a very interesting topic. I know there are, for example, at CMU, there's an executive program for CISOs. And so, you would have a certificate from CMU from participation in that particular program. So that's maybe a step in that direction. But it's interesting the concept you bring up and how that might be interested. But again, I think at the end of the day, if folks in the information security area are seen as business people who make good business decisions that just happen to be information security decisions, that raises their profile, whether they have the three letters after their name or not.
Well, I guess I look at it in the context of the cyber attacks and the data breaches that we see that are so prevalent.
Hmm.
And while you worked with us in the division of our company, IT Asset Management, we have another division of cybersecurity consulting where many of our clients come to us because before being our client, they had a serious security incident or a data breach, and their legal counsel referred them to us to help them post breach, and with then helping it, not have, keeping that from happening in the future.
Sure.
When we get to looking at root causes of these security incidents, almost without fail, IT people will tell us, we knew it was a matter of time. We knew these problems were here. We couldn't get budget. We couldn't get executive buy-in. We continued to have our budgets cut. We continued to have our department downsized. I think if we had people, dying from medical malpractice at the levels that we have cyber incidents across this country, where people's very private, very sensitive information is just blasted out there, I think maybe there would, and if there was some type of fiduciary aspect to that CIO role, CISO role, or practitioner role, where when a risk analysis is performed and you present those findings to the board or executive leadership, and they decide to reprioritize away from areas of risk for the sake of bottom line, maybe if a CISO knew that they were potentially going to lose their licensing or be censured by some type of licensing board, maybe that would give them the authority or the power to kind of push back a little bit more, to say, no, wait a minute, it's not only is this best practice under NIST, I've got my professional life here at stake. So we need to look at this a little bit harder, and maybe enforce some of the risk acceptance of people actually signing off, and putting their own skin in the game when they say, no, we're not going to focus on remediation of certain areas.
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting concept. I think it's a big concept, but again, it's interesting the point you made about, companies saying, well, we couldn't get the budget, or we couldn't get the, whatever. Again, I think from a risk standpoint, companies take on risk all the time. They take it on every day.
Sure.
And, if there is a business decision made to ignore risk, then no one should be surprised when that risk occurs.
Yeah.
And so, so part of it is, I think, again, I'm sorry, I keep sounding like a broken record, but coming at this as a business risk function, right? And you accept certain risks, and you remediate or eliminate other risks. It's at least it's a proactive process, right? Versus you're surprised by it, so to speak. But I think it's an interesting concept, Angie. Something to think about.
I think one of the things that dovetails along with that is, and I find this to be interesting as we go out in the marketplace. So, we obviously, I think for well over a decade now, we've had this thing called an MSP. We've evolved those into MSSPs or whatever. But what I find to be interesting is, especially from an outsourcing perspective, that there really isn't a clearly defined pathway to say, you are qualified to be a service provider that's going to have some level of responsibility, where as a third party who presents risk to the organization, there's been some validation done by a third party that says that, for lack of a better term, you're legit. And, when you start talking about technology, and you had mentioned it when you first started, you talked about, we weren't as connected. I mean, we are ultra connected today, that I'm aware of, including my local lumber yard, and people that are out in the woods. Everybody is connected with technology, and you lose technology and you ain't making money. Right. Okay. So now I dial that into, you say to someone, okay, you're going to be some third-party vendor. Maybe you're going to store data. You're going to use it for marketing purposes, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
it's really weird to me, especially when we get involved in some very large enterprises, and even in governmental work where there is not clearly defined rules, regulations, rules of the road, or whatever on, who gets to do this work. And
Yeah.
so, I don't know. I don't know what you think about that. I mean, I know that I put it this way. I know the level of due diligence we went through with your firm.
Yeah.
Okay. But I'm telling you, Steve, as a practitioner out in the space today, that is not the case. It's
Yeah.
really not. And I wonder, what do you think about that? What do you
Yeah.
think about service providers that basically roll into Dodge, hang up a shingle and say, yeah, I'm here to do work?
I think it all speaks to kind of the reputational component of all this stuff. There's a reputational component to who do I pick? Like, how do I know that you guys are good versus the other guys aren't? Right. So there's that component. There's the component from a reputational perspective, as we talked about with Angie's question about internally and externally. But internally, do you have the criteria or the criterion to be seen as someone who is fiduciary or respected or whatever, right? So there's that component. There's the reputational situation of a company losing their reputation, which is one of the things that we were most concerned about, because in the business that I was in, your reputation is pretty much it. We didn't create products. We didn't, our knowledge was and expertise was what people paid for, and a big part of that is your reputation, right? And so you have all these reputational components flying around here in different situations, but they're all reputational. And so, how do we do that, right? It's a fair point. And how do we look at and say, yeah, these guys are good or these guys aren't? And I think you use trusted resources that you think know what's going on and you trust their opinion. Um, and they have a good reputation. And then that reputation is a kind of a halo effect over the people that they recommend. And it goes from there. There isn't, though, aside from results that you can glean from their other engagements, et cetera. There isn't a standard that you can go to and say, oh yeah, these guys have a check mark next to their name. Except they're ISO certified, things along those lines. So
Right.
yeah, it's very interesting. But I think that's that whole reputational and community thing that comes along here, right? You need to find people who you trust, who happen to know the experience of others, and then you go down that road, and then you become part of that for the next organization.
Well, and I'll tell you a quick story just because it gives me an excuse to say I told you so to Joe. 3 years ago, I said to Joe that we need to get SOC 2. We need to do that. And that I believe that that's table stakes to provide services. It will be, and increasingly has become that. And it's a very expensive endeavor. It's incredibly labor intensive, especially when you're talking about a small business like Reclamere. But we did it. The first year, one of the very first benefits right out of the chute was getting our SOC 2 audit. Our cyber liability insurance premium dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's insurance premiums ever go down. That does not happen. And it was not just a little decrease, It was a big decrease.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing that's happened is it really pushes along the due diligence process when you have a valid SOC 2 that you can send to CIO purchasing folks. I mean, they instantly recognize that. So you're right about that third party attestation. And just to kind of tease, hopefully, a bigger announcement for next year, we just recently got accepted to be a service provider to one of the global accounting firms' service provider network. That was a big vetting process that we as a company, as well as our work product, had to undergo. So
Yeah.
that you're right. That independent validation is just super important. And I'm getting a little bit on the industry certification side of it. I'm getting a little jaded about that because I've seen some folks, especially in the ITAD, ITAM space, that have managed to do some pretty shady things and still maintain industry certifications such as, I Sigma and BAN. But when you're talking about CPAs in particular, these are folks that take very seriously what they endorse and their auditing.
Yeah.
So that's been a good move for us, even though Joe didn't want to do it originally.
Well,
Let's be honest though, Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Joe didn't want to do it because, see, Angie goes after these bright, shiny things. She's like a cat. And so, and these bright, shiny things normally cost a lot of money. I'm the guy at the end of the hallway that has to figure out how to carry the bag to then go make the money to pay for the things. It's like being married, but she's my sister. So she finds things that are cool to buy, and I have to go get the money to buy them. That's the relationship. And yes, she told me so.
There you go. Well, one thing I'll just throw out there, which is both bad and good. So in my previous organization, we went through the process of ISO 27001, and we did a pretty wide scope of work, so to speak, to do that, because we said, if we're going to go to this, we're going to go to the trouble of doing this, let's get some value out of this thing, right? So we said, hey, what could we do? So we did, and have been certified for many, many years. Anyway, what we found is through our client audit process, which we were very, very active in that. When I started, I think back in 2016, we did about 30 client audits a year. This year we'll end up close to 300, if not over.
Wow.
So there, that has grown exponentially in the amount of effort, et cetera, that goes along with that, because it's such an important thing, again, from a reputational and other perspective for clients. So we went through this whole thing, and when we ask our clients, hey, or when they ask us, their audit questions, we say, hey, we're, ISO 27001 certified, is that sufficient? And they said, oh, that's great to hear, but answer our questions anyway. So is that beneficial in that particular circumstance? Yeah, but not very much. But where it is beneficial is us going through that process made our capabilities better. And
Yes.
we did things that we do things now that we wouldn't have done otherwise.
Right. Sure.
And so while our hope was we do this ISO thing and we never have to answer another questionnaire, it didn't turn out to be that way. But it made us much, much better to be able to answer the questionnaires, if that makes sense. So there's kind of, there's an upside to that, even if it's not as external as we maybe had hoped it to be. Again, that's on the organizational side, not so much the individual side.
And it also helps too, because I know as business owners, you always think that your folks are doing everything the very best and everything is buttoned up. That annual audit process really kind of gives me peace of mind when we're getting that second set of eyes on an annual basis. And it does get easier each year. The other thing is that, yes, you're still asked to complete those surveys, complete those questionnaires. But if the client comes back, or the prospective client comes back and says, well, show me, you have it right at your fingertips. You have an up-to-date incident response plan. You have evidence that you perform your tabletop exercises. All of that is right there at your fingertips, and you're not scrambling to try to, pull some stuff together.
Right.
And you're not surprised by anything that's on the questionnaire, because if it's a legit questionnaire, it's following something, whether it's NIST CSF, whether it's HIPAA security rule in healthcare, but it's following some type of accepted framework for what it is that you need to have in place to do business with them.
And I also think it can speak internally to that idea of having a certificate or having a credential, even though you may not, you don't have the ISO, so to speak, behind your specific name. You're known internally as the person or persons who brought ISO certification or SOC 2 or whatever into your organization. And so does that add some credibility that, like, so to speak, the CPA might? Yeah, it does. It's not the same, but it does help from that perspective, at the individual level.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Well, let me ask you a fun question. What is your greatest joy when you are working with your CMU students?
Well, that's a great question. There's a lot actually, and the students who are in this course or these courses, the program, are successful business people already.
Yeah.
They are directors, or like I said, some cases CIOs and things like that. So they have their act together to begin with. They're wanting to take it to the next level. So that's kind of who we're dealing with. I think the best thing that you see is when folks start to realize that there are some tools out there that they can use and techniques and things, but they actually are pretty good at what they do. And it's
Mhm.
almost a reinforcement of things that they're doing, or maybe a couple of new things that they can put directly in. But we hear very often that people say, "Oh yeah, I had a meeting, last week, and I used whatever from the class or from the discussion, and it went over well." Things like that. So you're giving them more tools, and they're using
Well,
those. So they're finding value in having those additional things there. And to be honest with you, a lot of the stuff is just kind of gleaned from doing the job for a long time.
yeah,
And you've kind of been down the road, and
yeah.
these lots of stuff have happened, and so you can share those experiences, and then you see people putting them to use. That's probably the best part that I've seen.
Well, and to be fair and balanced to Joe, there are times where he gets to tell me, he told me so. A few years ago, he wanted to become part of an executive peer group coaching where, quarterly we go, our financials are benchmarked against about 1,000 other companies, similar size, similar industry. And it's a lot of work, and especially getting everything set up, chart of accounts to match their, their tools and everything. It was a heavy lift, and I fought him every step of the way. But one of the greatest things that we've gotten out of, or at least I've gotten out of that, is I've gotten some confidence as a business owner and a leader that we're doing some stuff right.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I can see where, being one of those people that our coach helps us and our peers help us with that, how important that is for me. I can see where that would be so rewarding for you,
Yeah.
being their instructor and watching kind of that confidence grow through the program.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a coaching component that goes through the entire program.
Mhm.
And I think there's just really a need in business in general, but certainly in the IT disciplines,
Mhm.
for coaching and learning from others in a way that's conducive and appropriate to what it is that you're doing. Not
Mhm.
just telling you, some stuff that you'll never use, right? Really
Yeah.
keying in on what it is. And in the information security area, I think that's especially important because it
Mhm.
is seen, and it is a very technical area. But again, transcending that and turning it into a business discipline that is critical for
Mhm.
the organization to be able to continue to operate and operate well. That's a
Yeah.
transformation that's very, very important for IT folks in that area to make. And so the help that can be provided there, it's really worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, and
They-
people can take a look at your LinkedIn profile and see that you've spent time at two of the biggest law firms in the world, in the top 50. And that is just super impressive. My early experience with attorneys in the form of digital forensics was teaching for the Pennsylvania Bar Institute in the early days of e-discovery.
Mm.
And I remember one of the saddest things were attorneys that are the age that I am now, when e-discovery was really starting to become a thing that was important. And we're talking about attorneys that could barely use email at the time. They had paralegals and admin assistants that did all of that for them. And I remember on not on not just one occasion, but in several of my classes, attorneys would say, "Wow, I just want to retire before I have to use this e-discovery stuff."
Sure.
And I remember thinking at the time, because I would have been in my, late 30s, early 40s at that point in time, thinking, wow, I hope I don't ever get to that point in my career where there's something new. Like right now, it's AI. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh God, I just want to retire. I don't want to learn this stuff. That those folks that you're teaching that are in this program, are exactly the kind of leaders that want to continue to learn. They want to continue to be challenged.
Right.
And that's also super exciting. That's one of the things that keeps me going in this profession. Every time there's something new and shiny, that is what gets me excited. Right now it's AI. I'm loving every single thing around GRC to do with AI. But I just never hope I get to that point where I'm just like praying for retirement because there's something on the horizon. I just don't want to learn.
Yeah.
I just pray that the things that she wants to buy, Steve, get cheaper, because they don't get cheaper. They really don't. And
That's true.
It's just constant. So you've had a really cool career. We agree. You're a cool dude. We agree. So young CIO comes to you and says, hey, what is that one major kernel of wisdom, advice, or knowledge that you want to share with me that's going to have the greatest impact on my career?
Wow, you didn't tell me this was going to be like an interview here. So, the one thing, two things come to my mind. But the first one is don't be a jerk. And
I love it.
the reason is because nobody wants to work for jerks. I mean, you might have to, but you don't want to.
Yeah.
And part of the job, I think, as a senior manager in a firm, is the need to have folks that want to work and want to work well, not for you necessarily, but for the company.
Sure.
And in many ways for themselves. And so, I think if you want to get the most from your organization and the folks within it and do the best for them, don't be a jerk. It's just that simple.
Okay.
The other thing that I would always tell, and I've just told folks in various classes, et cetera, is I think IT is a customer service business. And I think if you are in the IT, I don't care what you do in IT, you are in customer service. If you are a programmer somewhere, you are in customer service. Why? Because you want to make sure that the programs and the routines and the applications, et cetera, that you use are actually valuable to your end user, whoever that is. So you have to have a customer service mindset in everything that you do, regardless of your role within IT. I think if you do those two things, you're going to be pretty successful, and you're going to build an organization that's underpinned with a kind of a servant leadership type arrangement, as well as this goal of being customer service focused. And if you're customer service focused, I bet you're going to be successful. So those would be the two things that come to my mind, Joe, advice I would give to somebody.
So don't be a jerk, but be a servant leader.
There you go.
Cool. I like it.
There you go.
Angie, in the spirit of equal time, do you have any last minute questions for Steve?
Well, I mean, I think we should start charging a subscription fee to Data Security Over Coffee because, to get some words of wisdom from a CMU instructor like
Global
that's
CIO, global
CIO. That is really, really, really powerful. Now, I just want to wish Steve all the best. I mean, I'm on one hand, I'm jealous because you're doing in your next chapter the kind of really rewarding things that I would like to be doing. My definition of retirement is only working with clients I like and want to work with, who pay me well to do that work, and to give back. And it looks like you're living my dream, man. So I just wish you all the very best.
Thank you. That's very kind. I appreciate that very much.
So, Steve, do you have any questions for Angie and I?
No, you're a pretty formidable group there. I don't want to, I don't want to. I can't hang there. So no, I don't think so. I appreciate you guys.
Sure.
Your kind words and allowing me to bend the airwaves here for a couple minutes. But no, it's been a great pleasure. I'm glad we were able to talk again.
Me too.
Me too.
I hope that. I hope you and your family have a great Thanksgiving Day holiday.
You as well.
Wish you all the best with hanging your own shingle out.
Okay. Thank you.
Entrepreneur is always cool. And my testimonial to those CIO people in CMU is they better pay attention to Steve because he knows what the heck he's talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Have a great holiday. Take care. And Angie, if you want to do what Steve's doing, stop buying or going after expensive things all the time, and we could save more money. Anyway, see y'all later.
Bye, Steve. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.